Grace and peace. I'm Brian Musser, the Baptist Campus Minister at Drexel, and this is Peace and Power Bible Study. The peace of Jesus Christ to change your life, the power of the Holy Spirit to change the world. And we are continuing our study in worship, putting work back into worship, connecting our beliefs with our work. And this is week 6, and we will be looking at work, rest, balance. And so far in this lesson, this is the third video for week 6, the final video for week 6. And we have already looked at in the first lesson, we see that God rests, and we can display the image of God in us as we rest because God rested. We can look like a God who rests when we rest. So as we've been working through this, we've seen that we can work like God works and display the image of God as we work. And then as we work together in community, we can display the image of a triune God, of a Trinity that works together. Now we're looking at the fact that when we don't work and when we rest, we can actually also display the image of God as we rest as well. And then in the second video of this week, we saw that resting is an act of obedience. And not only is it an act of obedience, but rest is for our benefit. God commands us to rest because rest is good for us. This video, the third video, we're going to talk about trust. Rest flows from trust, and rest develops trust. Looking at a verse that you may not have seen too much before, but Nehemiah 10:31. When the surrounding peoples bring merchandise of any kind of grain to sell on the Sabbath, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or a holy day. We will also leave the land uncultivated in the 7th year and will cancel every debt. If you are in an agrarian society like the Jewish people were in these verses that are described in Nehemiah, farming doesn't take days off. There is always something to do, plants to be weeded, animals to be tended on every day of the week. They don't know about the Sabbath. There is always work to be done. Farming work is never completed, is never completely accomplished. So taking time off means that you have less time to do the work that needs to be done. Also, if you're a businessman and you close the door and won't buy and sell on a Sabbath, on a day of rest, you are probably losing out business to your competitors if there are other people willing to buy and sell on those days. So without God in the equation, without any of this, it would make sense to us that working 7 days, we could get more done than working 6 days and 1 day of rest. The question here is, do you trust God and what God says to bless you to take care of things on that 7th day while you're resting, even when you are not physically invested in it yourself? Resting is a statement of trust toward God and toward others. And resting answers this spiritual question, am I alone? Because if we are alone in this universe, if we are the only ones we can count on, then resting doesn't make sense. But if God is there and we are able to depend upon God even while we're working, but especially while we're resting, then resting is something we can do. And practicing resting will help develop our trust in God, a God who can take care of us even though we aren't actively working at taking care of ourselves at this moment. And our trust in others because we have let them do things while we rested. Now, this is the problem with rest. Problem with rest is quite often a problem with us. Now, there are certain folks who are untrustworthy in certain situations that are untrustworthy. But this is not God. God is not untrustworthy. We are untrusting. We have an issue with trusting God. We don't trust God because of our own sin. We create an image of God that looks like humanity. Instead of having humanity display the image of God, we imagine God in the image of humanity. And we humans are not trustworthy, so we apply that untrustworthiness about ourselves to the God. And we think we have to work hard in order for this to be a safe place for us to live, and constantly keep trying to work. But trust and rest, developing trust, it develops this idea that the universe is a safe place for us because there is a God who takes care of us. And quite often, he takes care of us through the work of other people. Now, how do you decide to do something when you have more than one good option? There are two things that need to be done, two things that should be done. What do you do to decide between the two? How do you work through that? And then how do you feel when you realize that you can't do something that should be done? When we reach the limits of who we are as a person, if you have answers to that thoughts, drop them down into the comments. We have to come to the conclusion of our humanity. This is the other spiritual question that rest helps us deal with. Am I enough? Rest helps us accept our God-given human limitations. I am not God, so there are things that I cannot do. I am limited by time, resources, and ability. It is okay that I can do these things because there is a God who can do them. You are absolutely enough to get everything done that God has intended for you to do. God is able to handle all those things that you cannot do. And he usually handles these through the work of other people. Remember from the previous lesson, the one right before this, we work together. We work in community like God works. Realizing that you need rest, even when there is good work that needs to be done, forces you into a worshipful relationship with God. Now, resting after work gives an opportunity to celebrate work. Rest gives us a chance to remember how dependent upon God and others we are. We can celebrate the good work that God has allowed us to do. We can celebrate the good work that God has allowed others to do. And celebrating someone else's work, especially if that person works in a similar place, similar field, similar job as you do, helps us not see each other as competitors, but helps us see each other as co-laborers, as co-workers. Celebrate when God blesses the work of someone else. And we can celebrate good work that God has done. Work is good. And when we rest, we can look back on the good work that is done, and we can celebrate it. Rest allows the place for celebration and worship of God through that celebration. And one last note, as you celebrate, remember to ask God for future blessing on our continued good work. So now in conclusion, rest is good. God rested and commanded us to rest. Rest can be worship. We should use it to celebrate life and to better understand our value in God's eyes. Rest develops our trust in God and in others. Rest is most meaningful when it's connected to work and to God. So usually this is a place where I talk about homework. We're going to talk about home rest. I know that's cheesy play on words. But anyways, specifically reference your work while worshiping God. Thank God for the work you are able to do. Ask God for help for future work. Number 2, sit in silence for 5 or more minutes doing nothing. See how hard that is to just be still and know that the Lord is God. Number 3, rest. As always, there are 2 ways to join this conversation live Monday nights via Zoom at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and these weekly wrap-ups on YouTube and WordPress. I am all over the social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, YouTube. Those links are in the description. I enjoyed having this conversation with you and hope it continues real soon.